Have you ever had a plan that felt so right? Like, this is definitely God, and then God just shuts it down? So, I had a really good plan, like a God honoring, selfless, gold star kind of Christian kind of plan. And God was like, nope, not today. Ugh. Hello, friends, and welcome back to Faith It Till You Make It. So, today we're talking about something that I don't think we talk about enough. And honestly, I didn't plan on talking about it yet because I'm still kind of in the middle of it. We spend a lot of time talking about obedience, right? About saying yes to God, about stepping out in faith, about trusting that when we say yes to God, we will be aligned with His will for us. We love a good God called me and I went story, but no one really prepares you for what happens when God says no to you. Not no to something reckless or no to something sinful, but no to something good, something meaningful, something that felt aligned with Him. And then you're left sitting there like, wait, what? So, if you've been around here for a while, you know that every year I go on a mission trip to Mexico. And when I say this trip matters to me, I mean it matters. It's not just a trip, it's like a marker of my faith every single year. It's where I feel most like myself. It's where Mission Rachel shows up loud, free, bold, and expectant. We spend the week building homes, running kids' camps, praying over people, the best worship at night. And every year there are families and kids who are literally waiting for us to come back. So this isn't casual. This isn't a vacation. This is personal. And there's something about that week that just resets me. It strips away all the noise, like the schedules, the expectations, the roles I carry at home, and I remember who I am when I'm not trying to manage everything. And I think that's why this one hit so hard because it didn't just feel like a trip got canceled. It felt like a version of me didn't get to exist this year. And leading up to this trip, there were concerns. We go to Mexico, and there had been some cartel violence recently in Mexico that started to introduce some fear around. But it wasn't in the area that we go to. And honestly, every year, the enemy loves to highlight these events in the news. It's like a way to let our fear stop us from spreading the gospel and serving others. And so when the news came up, it was business as usual for me. So we kept planning because in our minds, it was like, okay, God, we see the risk, but this is still your work. You will make a way. He always does. And realistically, if it was completely safe, would it even still be a mission? So when the news first hit, we were like, okay, so this is all happening 1,200 miles away from where we're going to be. And it involves a cartel faction that isn't even the faction that's within our area that we serve. So our security team was like, it's the equivalence of gang activity in Arkansas, and we live in California. We don't really change what we're doing in California because some schmucks acted up in Arkansas. So we were still in, but also closely monitoring intelligence channels in case anything changed. So when the news first hit about the activity 1,200 miles away, participants started dropping out because of the fear. And all I could think was, hey, your faith is showing, in the mild, snarky way. And then, last minute, everything changed. There were new concerns raised through our intelligence channels, and this time it was closer to our specific area, and it did involve the faction of the cartel that we are familiar with. So now, this meant a different kind of risk. Bringing 1,200 people, with half of them being students, was no longer wisdom, it was folly. And just like that, the trip was canceled, just days before we were preparing to leave. I think almost immediately I hit all the stages of grief. I went straight to denial with, nah, this is just another overly cautious reaction. We'll still be going. The church will change their mind. Then hit anger. I was there for longer than I would prefer. I was so angry that we were choosing not to go to a place where people actually live every day because we feel like their home isn't safe for us. How privileged are we that we get to say, no, not this year, when the people that we serve live there every day? A mission trip isn't about safe. It is about serving those in need. And don't they need us now? And then, of course, here came that phrase again about showing our faith. But this time, it actually didn't feel clever. It felt complicated. Now, I will say, I liked the bargaining phase of grief, though. It was like a puzzle to figure out. I kept thinking about all the ways that I could still go and serve in Mexico during my spring break. I thought about what it would look like if I just drove there on my own without the church. I went so far as to have real conversations with my husband about how he would feel if I went. And then I called our head of security team and was like, okay, I need you to break it down for me. How dangerous would it be if it was like me and just a couple of adults that went? And after praying through it, I just couldn't find peace with the decision. And so I continued down the grief trail. And I remember just sitting there thinking, none of this makes sense. Like, God, this whole trip is for you. This trip is what you have called us to. It is to show your love. God, this is serving people. This is loving people. Why would you shut this down? And I think what made this trip so hard wasn't that it just got canceled. It's that it was a good thing that got canceled. Because let's be honest, if God shuts down something messy or unhealthy in our lives, we can usually make peace with that. We're like, okay, yeah, God, that tracks. Thanks for cleaning that one up. But this was good. It was noble and it was meaningful. And I think that's where the confusion really set in for me, because we don't have a category for that. We don't know what to do when God says no to something that looks like obedience. Now, the fourth stage of grief is depression. And that one also hit hard for me because my heart broke. I felt so bad for the commitments that we made to the Mexico community that we had to break. We had a responsibility to that community and it was good. We all wanted it. Even those that had to make that difficult decision to cancel it didn't want to, but they had to. It's not like I'm overstating our impact in the local community there. When we bring 1,200 people across the border, it's more than just the houses that we build. It's more than just the children we love on. It's the guy that supplies our porta potties at our camp for a week that makes more money that entire week than the entire year. It's Angel, who transforms his taqueria into a bayside haven for the week, and the amount of work him and his sons put into serving us the most delicious tacos, where he also probably earns more that 1 week than the entire year. It's the pastors that we work with. It's the orphanage we serve. It's the women's shelters we serve. It's the local production company we hire for the week. It's the local guy we work with for our food orders. It's the water company we contract out. It's all of those things and more, and my heart broke for every single one of those people. And yes, of course, selfishly, my heart broke for myself. And if I'm honest, I think a part of me kept thinking about, what does this mean for future trips? Canceling this one, does that mean we will cancel more anytime a news story hits? Will we as a church lose our momentum with serving in Mexico? But even scarier, am I going to lose Mission Rachel before I even get her back? And that's what I think made it so heavy. It wasn't just about what we were going to do. It was about what wouldn't happen because we weren't there. And I had to wrestle with this uncomfortable truth because God didn't need us to show up in order for him to show up. And I kept coming back to this tension because we all sure do love God's plan until it overrides our own. I did finally make it to acceptance a few days later, but I did hit a little bit of guilt before I landed there. But here's the part that I didn't expect. I was kind of relieved that the trip got canceled, and I hate even saying that out loud because a part of me feels like that makes me a bad Christian. Like, how do you feel relieved that a mission trip got canceled, But it was there, this quiet and subtle sense of, I actually get to be home this week. I don't have to miss time with my family. I don't have to be gone. I don't have to pour out in the same way that I normally do. And I found myself holding these two completely opposite emotions at the same time. It's grief and it's gratitude. And I didn't know which one I was allowed to feel. I actually almost made the decision to just take back my time off request with work and just tap back into the grind. It felt a little too guilt-ridden to originally take a week and a half off of work to serve others, and then all of a sudden have a week off doing nothing and serving myself instead. But the more I thought about it, I had an opportunity that I haven't had since 2018 to spend a spring break week off with my own family, to maybe do something spontaneous. And I started to dream about the week's possibilities. Also, note, I have been in a season of burnout. And if I'm being really honest, I don't know if I would have ever chosen rest. I would have chosen obedience, whatever I'm supposed to do, or at least what I thought obedient looked like. But God didn't ask me what I preferred. He ended up just giving me what I needed instead. So in acceptance, battle, and guilt, I also found immense gratitude. And it inspired an opportunity to serve my own family in kind of a fun way. I started thinking about what we can do as a family, how we can make this week memorable and purposeful for our family unit. And then we made a spontaneous decision. Since we suddenly had this week free, we thought, let's surprise our kids with a trip to Disneyland. Which, by the way, was amazing, like core memory kind of amazing. But even in the middle of that, I felt extremely guilty. I remember having this thought, should I be having this much fun right now? Like, this week was supposed to be about serving, about sacrifice, about pouring out. And instead, I'm standing in line for rides and eating churros. And it felt very conflicting. I felt incredibly blessed that we had this opportunity to just do a Disney trip on a whim. I felt grateful to God for his provisions for our family and that we even had the opportunity to gain new memories. But I was still very mad and grieving the mission trip that changed my own life 8 years ago. And I spent those days in Disneyland balancing joy and gratitude with grief and guilt. And there was one moment where we were all laughing, and I think I had just gotten off of rides. My kids were just so happy. And I had this split-second thought. This is actually kind of the moment that I usually miss. And it hit me. I'm always so focused on going where I feel most impactful that sometimes I forget God also placed me here, in this family, on purpose. And I think what I realized is this, that sometimes when God changes our plans, we're not just grieving what we lost, but we feel guilty for what we've gained. And that was totally it. I felt guilty for all I was given that week while I was simultaneously stripped of something else. So I've been sitting with this question all week. What is God doing here? Not why did this happen, but what is he doing? Because I don't think God was absent in this. I think he was very present, just not in the way that I expected. And when the tension in Mexico first arose before the trip was canceled, me and my team prayed that God would protect our steps and help us be wise in our service. And we also prayed that if for any reason we were not intended to go this year, that it wouldn't be some casual concern and cancellation. That if it were to be canceled, we prayed that a door would be slammed shut for us to avoid the folly. And based off the intel that we received, the door was slammed shut, and there was no question that bringing 1,200 people across the border was not the move this season. And I realized we always ask God to make it clear. God, show me. God, just make it obvious. And then when he does, and it's not what we wanted, we're like, well, not like that. Scripture says in Proverbs 16:9 that we can make our plans, but God establishes our steps. And I'm like, cool. I love that for us. But also, I kind of hate that verse a little bit right now because I had plans. I had good ones to do good things for the kingdom. And he still said no. But maybe if I could be a mature adult here, closed doors aren't punishment. Maybe they're protection or redirection or an invitation to something new. And just because I don't understand God's no doesn't mean he isn't still good in it. So what do we do when God says no? Not in theory, but in real life. And so here's kind of what I'm learning through all of this. First, grieve it. Don't skip past the disappointment because it was God's will. I feel like if I didn't allow myself to grieve what God took away, then I wasn't going to leave space for what God was going to give me instead. Second, I think it's important to name what mattered. And that's why it hurts. Identifying the thing that we're grieving shows us our values. It shows us the posture in our heart. And I had my own little lesson in naming what mattered. And now it's about healing the broken parts and protecting the holy pieces. Third, I would say, is to stay open to what God is doing instead. Not forcing meaning, but noticing it. God didn't cancel this mission trip so I can go to Disneyland. I wasn't that naive in forcing meaning. But I noticed that I was able to be present with my family in a new way. And I noticed that what God did through our church in the wake of the cancellation created a whole new way to serve not only our community, but also the Mexico community that we love through even more people. As a side note, our church pivoted so well with only days to plan and made an incredible weekend of worship, fundraising, and a week's worth of community service projects. And our church was still able to raise an incredible amount of money for our partners in Mexico so that they could still be financially blessed even in our absence. Now, number 4, I would say, is harder to do. But we need to let go of guilt. Because joy is not disobedience. It is okay to experience joy. And I know that this may be a wild take, but guilt isn't an emotion. It is simply a series of nurtured programming that tries to prevent us from living well, from grieving well, from suffering well, and from responding well. There is joy in grief, and there's joy in loss, and there's joy in anything when you are in the presence of God. And guilt is not from God. It's from our own mommy and daddy issues. And then the last thing I would say is number 5, trust anyway. Even when it doesn't make sense, and even when the thing that was taken away was good, trusting that God never wastes anything and works everything for his good isn't just biblical, it is faith. Because trusting God when it works out, that's easy. But trusting God when it doesn't work out, when it costs you something, when it confuses you, that's where your faith actually gets formed. I think the guilt has definitely been the hardest for me to let go of because somehow I'm measuring the loss and the gain from my little puny perspective. But trusting anyway, knowing that God sees the whole picture is helping me to live in joy and not the guilt. Okay, I think we all love the idea of following God when it leads somewhere exciting or where we wanted to go anyway. But the real question, do we still trust him when he lovingly says, hey, not this time? And you know what? Maybe faith isn't just built in the yeses. Maybe it's built in the no's and not yets. Maybe the goal was never to just get to Mexico. Maybe the goal was to become someone who trusts God even when she doesn't. So if you're in a season right now where something isn't going the way you planned, even something good, I'm going to leave you with this. Instead of asking God, why not? Try asking, God, what are you inviting me into instead? And what does obedience look like now? Hey, if this episode resonated with you at all, send it to someone who might be sitting in a no season right now. And if you have a minute, leaving a review helps more people to find the podcast.